How 6 men traveled through the wide world. There was once upon a time a man who understood all sorts of arts. He served in the war, and he bore himself bravely as well. But when the war was over, he got his discharge and set out on his travels with 3 farthings in his pocket for pay. Wait, he said, that does not please me. Only let me find the right people, and the king shall yet give me all the treasures of his kingdom. And he strode angrily into the forest, and there he saw a man standing who had uprooted 6 trees as if they were straw. He said to him, "Will you be my servant and travel with me?"
"Yes," he said, "but first of all I will take this little bundle of sticks home to my mother."
And he took one of the trees and wound it around the other 5, and raised the bundle on his shoulders and bore it off. Then he came back and went with his new master, and who said, "We ought to take the travel around the wide world." And when they had gone a little way, they came upon a hunter, who was on his knees, his gun to his shoulder, aiming at something. And the master said to him, "Hunter, what are you aiming at?" He answered, 2 miles from this place a fly sits on a branch of an oak. I want to shoot its eye out." "Oh, go with me," said the man. "If we 3 together, we shall easily travel through the wide world." The hunter agreed and went with him, and they came to 7 windmills whose sails were going around quite fast, and yet they did not see a breath of wind nor a leaf moving. The man said, "I don't know who's turning those windmills, but there's not the slightest breeze blowing." So he walked on with his servants, and when they had gone 2 miles, they saw a man sitting on a tree, holding one of his nostrils and blowing out the other. "Fellow, what are you puffing at up there?" asked the man. He replied, 2 miles from this place are standing 7 windmills. See, I am blowing to drive them around." "Oh, well, come with us," he said. "If we 4 are together, we shall easily travel through the wide world." So the blower got down and went with them. And after a time, they saw a man who was standing on one leg, and had unstrapped the other, and laid it near them. Then said the master, "You have made yourself very comfortable to rest."
"I'm a runner," answered he, "and so that I shall not go too quickly, I have unstrapped one leg, and when I run with 2 legs, I go faster than a bird flies."
"Come with us. If we 5 are together, we shall easily travel through the wide world." So he went with them, and not long afterward, met a man who wore a little hat, but it had it slouched over one ear. "Manners, manners," said the man to him. "Don't hang your hat over one ear. You look like a madman." "I dare not," said the other, "for if I were to put my hat on straight, there would come such a frost that the birds in the sky would freeze and all fall dead on the earth." And this is the origin of the X-Men. No, just kidding. "Oh, go with me," said the master. "If we 6 are together, we shall easily travel through the wide world." So now the 6 came to a town in which the king had proclaimed that whoever should run with his daughter in a race, and win, should become her husband. But if he lost, he must lose his head. This was reported to the man who declared he would compete. "But," he said, "I shall let my servant run for me." Well, the king replied, Then both your heads must be staked, and your head and his must be guaranteed for the winner." When this was agreed upon and settled, the man strapped on the runner's other leg, saying to him, "Now be nimble and see that we win." It was arranged that whoever should first bring water out of the stream a long way off should be the victor. Then the runner got a pitcher, and the king's daughter another, and they began to run at the same time. But in a moment, when the king's daughter was only a little way off, no spectator could see the runner, and it seemed as if the wind had whistled past. In a short time he reached the stream and filled his pitcher with water, and had already turned around again. But halfway home, a great drowsiness came over him, and he put down the pitcher and lay down, and he fell asleep. He had, however, put on a horse's skull which was lying on the ground for his pillow, so that his head should not be too comfortable and wake up soon. In the meantime, the king's daughter, who could also run very well as an ordinary man could, reached the stream and hastened back with her pitcher full of water. When she saw the runner lying asleep, she was delighted, and said, "My enemy has given into my hands." She emptied his pitcher and ran on. Everything now would have been lost if by the good luck the hunter had not been standing on the castle tower and had seen everything with his sharp eyes. "Ah," he said, "the king's daughter shall overreach us." And, loading his gun, he shot so cleverly that he shot away the horse's skull from under the runner's head without it hurting him. Then the runner awoke, jumped up, and saw that his pitcher was empty, and the king's daughter was far ahead. But he did not lose courage, and ran back to the stream to refill his pitcher. And once again, he was home 10 minutes before the king's daughter arrived. "Look," he said, "I have just exercised my legs. That was nothing of a run." But the king was angry, and his daughter even more so, and she should be carried away as a common discharged soldier. And they consulted together how they could destroy both him and his companions. "Then," said the king to her, "I have found a way. Don't be frightened. They shall not come home again," he said to them. "You must now make merry together, and eat and drink." And then he led them into a room which had a door of iron. The doors were also of iron, and the floor and the windows were barred with iron. In the room was a table spread with delicious food. The king said to them, "Go in and enjoy yourselves." And as soon as they were inside the doors were shut and bolted. Then he made the cooks come and ordered him to keep up a large fire under the room until the iron was red hot. The cook did so, and the 6 sitting around the table felt it grow very warm, and they thought that this was because of the good fare. But when the heat became still greater and they wanted to go out, they found the doors and windows fastened. Then they knew that the king meant them harm and was trying to suffocate them.
"But he shall not succeed,"
cried he of the little hats.
"I will make a frost come which shall make the fire ashamed and die out."
So he put his hat on straight, and at once there came such a frost that all the heat disappeared and the food on the dishes even began to freeze. When a couple of hours had passed, the king thought they must be quite dead from the heat, and he had the doors opened and went in to see for himself. But when the doors were opened, there stood all six, alive and well, saying that they were glad to come out to warm themselves, for the great cold in the room had frozen the food all hard on the dishes. Then the king went angrily to the cook and scolded him, and asked him why he had not done as he was told. But the cook answered, "There's heat enough there, see for yourself." Then the king saw a huge fire burning under the iron room, and understood that he could do no harm to the six in this way. The king now began to think how he could free himself from his unwelcome guests. He commanded the master come to them, and said, "If you will take gold and give up your right to my daughter, you shall have as much as you like." "Oh, yes, your majesty," answered he. "Give me as much as my servant can carry, and I will give up your daughter." The king was delighted, and the man said, "I will come and fetch it in 14 days. Then he called all the tailors in the kingdom together and made them sit down for 14 days sewing at a sack. When it was finished, he made the strong man who had uprooted the trees take the sack on his shoulder and go with him to the king. The king then said, "What a powerful fellow that is, carrying a bale of linen as large as a house on his shoulder." And he was much frightened, and thought, what a lot of gold he will take away with him. Then he got a ton of gold brought, and 16 of the strongest men had to carry it. But the strong man seized it with one hand, put it in the sack, and said, "Why don't you bring me some more? That scarcely covers the bottom." Then the king had to send away again and again to fetch his treasures, which the strong man shoved into his sack. But the sack was only half full. "Bring more," he cried. "These crumbs won't fit it." So 7,000 wagons of gold from the whole of the kingdom were driven up. These strong men shoved it into the sack, oxen and all. "I will no longer be particular," he said, "and will take what comes, so that the sack shall be full." When everything was put in, and there was not yet enough, he said, "I will make an end of this. It is easy to fasten a sack when it's not full." Then he threw it on his back and went on to his companions. Now, when the king saw how a single man was carrying away the wealth of the whole country, he was angry, and made his cavalry mount and pursue the six, and bring back the strong man with the sack. 2 regiments soon overtook them and called to them, "You are all prisoners. Lay down the sack of gold, and we shall cut you down." "What did you say?" said the blower. "Are we prisoners? Before that, you shall dance in the air." And he held one nostril and blew with the other at the 2 regiments, and they were separated and blown away in the blue sky over the mountains, one this way and one that. The sergeant major cried for mercy, saying that he had 9 wounds and was a brave fellow and did not deserve this disgrace. So the blower led him off, and he came down without hurt. Then he said to him,
"Now go home to the king and say that if he sends any more cavalry, I will blow them all up in the air as well."
When the king received this message, he said, "Let the foes go, they are bewitched." Then the 6 brought the treasure home, and shared it among themselves, and lived contentedly until the end of their days.